Thank you. So it's not easy going last because the stories have been so good. Stephen's apologized for me for being the third American, so I can't help that. I'll try not to repeat the same insights, but what I want to do is tell you, I guess, the story of the journey that we've been on. And it's a story I'll tell in pictures that I'll go through real quickly, and then you can grab me afterwards and ask me some questions. And it starts with this thought. Some of you may know this man who spoke previously at a Green Mondays event, Ronan Dunn. He's the UK CEO, and this is something he said a few weeks ago, although he said this many times, indicative, I think, of what Doug was talking about, a change in thinking from CSR to a more comprehensive way of thinking about transformation of the business. And transformation of society and the business is wrapped up into one idea rather than separate things. So to give you a metric, when I started in our business 10 years ago, we invested about £30,000 per year. We're now, 10 years later, investing about £30 million per year. And people often ask me what were the kind of key stages in that journey, and that's what I'm going to quickly run you through in the next couple of minutes. So this is what Stephen was talking about, the Think Big program, which some of you may know in the UK. We started this, I guess, about 2008-09. Bill in the front row here came and helped us build this. And the idea was really simple. It was to help show our belief in young people by backing their ideas. So we agreed to back initially 5,000, now 10,000 projects in a variety of ways, and also back young people's ideas for projects, and back them by bringing, indicative of what Bella was talking about, the power of our brand and communication to their fingertips so they could campaign for more social change. And on the right side, Think Big for Planet was about having a very transformative view about how we could think about the use of ICT to transform sustainability challenges. And one of the headlines in our plan, a big, long series of forward-looking commitments, was to help 10 million customers lead more sustainable lives. And Ronan spoke a lot about this if you heard him at a previous event. We measure the impact in a whole range of ways. I'm going to move through this very quickly. Oops, let me go back one. So we measure the impact on young people, particularly their employability at times of high youth unemployment, their confidence, their digital skills, their communication skills, their leadership, but ultimately how well they can become entrepreneurial in their mindset and move into the workplace. We also measure the impact on the youth sector. In the UK, we have over 70 youth partners across Europe, over 100, 110. And so one of the key things we want to measure is, are we contributing something in excess of the cash? Are we making the youth sector more cohesive and stronger, and what can we bring? And we measure that both qualitatively. This is jumping ahead without me, and qualitatively. But a couple of years ago, we stood back and we said, that's quite big. We're getting lots of accolades, lots of awards. It's making our people feel happier. And it's pretty ambitious and on a bigger scale than an awful lot of companies, although some of the stories we heard here are truly extraordinary. But the question we asked was, is this enough? And can we be doing more? And what would the context of that be? And the context was this, right? In 2010, across Europe, so I'm thinking now in a European context, we were talking, and we still are, by the way, but talking a lot about crisis, right? A crisis of economic growth, a crisis for a generation of young people failing to move into employment, a crisis of entrepreneurialism, innovation, crisis in the digital economy, or other regions passing us by. And these issues were very, very relevant to us. The things that occupied us in the boardroom were the same issues. Are we entrepreneurial enough? Are we fast enough? Are we innovating quickly enough? Are we reacting to the problems in society around youth? You know, what is it that is going to help us transform who we are more quickly and grow more quickly? And we got very infatuated with the idea of shared value, which has been mentioned. I think we're going to do a workshop on it later. The idea that it's not what you do for society, but actually how you create this win-win that accelerates. And so we started to think very differently, clicker problems. Because the other thing we realized is that despite all these challenges in Europe, we were still living in an age of unprecedented innovation driven by digital technology. And that was certainly at the heart of our business model as a telecommunications company. So we started to use this word a lot. And I think this was the key change where we went from here to something much, much bigger. We talk a lot about transformation. I imagine nobody here is in a business or organization that hasn't gone through, you know, the T word, and probably repeatedly over the last years. And we started to think very differently about the kind of transformation that we wanted to drive as a business, using big words, big, bold, breakthrough, you know, that kind of stuff. and the social transformation that we wanted to be a part of in Europe. And so we brought those two things together and started to really accelerate and change the way we thought, not just about CSR social programs, but investment in economic activity, investment in a range of activities that no longer fit neatly into the buckets of CSR, sustainability, but fit into a broader thought around social and economic change, both for Europe and for our business. And I'm going to quickly just run through a few of the highlights. We still called it Think Big, but we started to redefine Think Big and use this language. Yeah, we used to think big, now we're going to think really, really big and think about transformation in big and bold ways and breakthrough. A little blurry. So we redefined the thought rather than helping people and planet. Big thought, a more entrepreneurial Europe was the thought that glued together the stuff that we wanted to do. And if I give you a longer version, a more entrepreneurial young Europe and Telefonica. Right, Stephen introduced me as O2, but O2 is owned by a global company called Telefonica, which is in Europe and across Latin America. So how do we activate this idea? I mean, it's quite a big thought, right? We are going to create a more entrepreneurial young Europe and Telefonica. And clearly, we're not going to do this on our own, but we wanted to take meaningful steps in a big, bold, breakthrough kind of way, commensurate with this idea of transformation. Because when you talk about transformation, you're allowed to bring pretty big ideas to the table. And we agreed to invest $150 million. So I remember the board meeting when I went, and I said, can I have $150 million, please? And they said, okay. Right? I used to go and ask for 50,000, and oh, geez, I don't know about that. But you come up with a big, sure, off you go. So we made a big commitment. This is real money. And these are a few of the things, and I'm going to run through them very quickly and then show you a little bit about how we've started to measure it. And the way we measure is a work in progress. We really don't know all the answers yet. But massively increased the size of the youth program across 6 countries, 300,000 young people that we want to reach. Launched a schools program, bringing an approach to digital skills, digital literacy, entrepreneurship to schools that we feel is lacking. Started building something called Wire Academies, physical places where we invest in digital startup businesses. We built 6 academies in a year across Europe, one of them in London, and backed over 100 businesses. We brought something to Europe called Campus Party, also known as Glastonbury for geeks, a huge festival of innovation, digital technology, young people collaborating, sharing, doing things together. This is coming to the O2 first week of September. Expect 10,000 young people a day. Well, not just young people, but people interested in innovation and change to come every day. And finally, trying to walk the walk as well, so investing in jobs in our own business. 14,000 new roles for young people across our operations in Europe and Latin America, about half of which are in Europe. So how do we think about measuring this? A lot of these things have been covered. We measure the employee engagement piece. 80% of our employees feel prouder, but also the thousands who participate feel they're learning new digital skills that make them better at their jobs. Our customers, Stephen spoke a lot about this in his wheel. The headline statistic, if customers are aware of what we're doing, particularly in the youth program, they're up to 35% higher in their brand consideration scores, which obviously drives retention and fandom. And shareholders, I think this is the hardest thing to measure, but one of the stories, and Rona may have told it, is by doing what we're doing and having a different dialogue with stakeholders, we started through the UK auction process for 4G to have a different dialogue rather than as a regulated industry, as a collaborator for change. And the estimate was that we probably saved 50 to 100 million in terms of the outcome of the process than what we would have done if we were seen as a regulated industry. And lastly, I think the thing that probably drives our leadership, our board and our leaders the most, is this idea of leadership. And that was the core thought when we put the transformation plan in place, is how to act more as a leader, so that the group on the top, you'll recognize them, UK leaders, on the bottom, leaders in Europe, and each of which are leaders that we have co-collaborated with to drive either a social change, in some senses co-investment from Europe or the UK. And it's fundamentally changed the relationship we have, again, as a regulated industry, with the governments, both in Europe and in each of our countries that we operate, in terms of how we interact with some pretty critical stakeholders. I think leadership is the hardest thing to measure, and yet the easiest thing to see, particularly for your leaders when it happens. And I think the tangible signs of leadership are in some of these cases. So I'll stop there. I'll move to the white sofa. I was afraid when I came there'd be a big lever if I sat down and didn't tell my story well.
It may be.